Welcome. I'm Tom DeCord. I'm very excited to have Karen Levin with me to talk about math teaching and AI. So Karen brings a tremendous blend of classroom experience coaching teachers in math, and technical proficiency as well. But I think above all, she has a real commitment to human-centered learning. So Karen, first of all, thanks so much for taking time out to be with me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Tom.
Okay, great. Well, let's jump in. Maybe with your math teaching and math coaching background, I know we both have a connection to the Boston area and teaching in the Boston area. Let us know a little bit about that teaching experience and coaching teachers.
Yeah, absolutely. I started out as a high school math teacher at a small charter school in Boston. It was more than 75% of students low income. And, I always liked technology. And at the time, that meant mainly graphing calculators and for my Algebra 1 and Algebra 2
Right.
students. And so, it was the annual Donors Choose campaigns, trying to get access to some tech there. And Desmos was kind of just coming out. So if we could get
Oh, right.
access to some computers, we could do some of that on laptops. And so that's where I started my career in the classroom in Boston. And then in that role, I had a small coaching role. And I kind of wondered as I was teaching, like, I'm seeing maybe 100 students a year, like, can I reach more students? And so I ended up doing a couple different fellowships that really opened my eyes to a broader lens on math teaching and learning. And so I moved into a fellowship with Education Pioneers and landed at a Boston nonprofit called Edvestors. And what Edvestors had noticed in Boston, which is one of the top urban centers for education nationwide, that just 1/3 of eighth graders were proficient on the Math MCAS,
Huh.
which is quite shocking. And so when they dug in further, they kind of noticed that of the schools that were doing really well, they were getting more than 75% of their students proficient. They were accessing human-led tutoring. And
I
so investors realized, like, and this is a common issue with human tutoring in general, it's quite expensive. And so
Right.
we're probably not going to do that for all of Boston, but they wondered, can we use technology as a way to get the same kind of tutor situation going on? And so through that, we launched a blended learning initiative supporting over 20 schools at any given time for about 6 years. And so I would coach folks in their blended learning, edtech tool, whatever math tool they chose. And we also had kind of a deeper learning initiative because we knew edtech wasn't a silver bullet and going to solve every problem. And so did that for quite a bit of time as well.
Sure, terrific. So let's jump into AI. So first of all, uh, what kind of drew you in to exploring AI's potential impact on the math classroom?
Yeah, because of the background in the EdTech initiative in Boston, and then when generative AI kind of first came out, my partner was really interested into it. And I was like, I don't know, not that excited about it. But kind of as I learned more and dove in and played around with it, I was realizing like this could have some really interesting potential for math teaching and learning. And it's all based on, as I learn more, mathematics that we teach
Right.
in K-12 and kind of early college. And so those two things fascinated me. And I wondered, like, what lessons did we learn from the initiative in Boston? And I think a lot of those lessons can continue on and take us into the age of AI.
Okay, so now the narrative has been for a while that math teachers are resistant to AI in the classroom. There was a poll last year done by Education Week where 34% of the math teachers polled did not want any kind of PD around AI. And when asked what would be the greatest impact of AI in the next 5 years, said students cheating more. In other words, the narrative is, okay, AI is a cheating tool for math students. So let's tackle that. You're consulting, you're working with dozens and dozens of schools, you're giving presentations, you're encountering math teachers, curriculum directors, and others from around the country. What's your sense of what the narrative is right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the biggest concerns that I hear, I always do kind of a word cloud of their concerns, and the middle is always
Right.
cheating. It's the largest one that folks worry about. For math, they also worry about the inaccuracy of the tools. You know, you'll hear both that the generative AI tools or AI tools can solve the math Olympiad. Also, it's terrible at basic arithmetic.
Right.
And so folks worry about that quite a bit. And then that last piece of students outsourcing their thinking, using it as a crutch, you know, not learning, et cetera. Those are the three biggest concerns I hear from math teachers. And when I think about, we'll take the cheating issue as the first one. You know, I always liked that the answers were in the back of the textbook because for me, I don't really care whether my students, I mean, I care that they're getting the answers correct, but I really care like how are they thinking about it? What method are they using? What's their understanding of the mathematical topic? So I'm kind of less concerned about um, the answer getting machine just saying
Right.
like here's the answer, right? And I would be worried, right, the biggest worry is that they're using it to just offload the thinking and so on. And so I hear that a ton from teachers. Math teachers in general kind of say, well, I do paper and pencil, so it's not a big deal. Like I don't have to worry about this AI thing the way that English teachers might, you know, when they're going home and doing a take home essay. But I think that you can use it either way, right? Like you can really use it, and in general, students want to do well and want to learn, and that's kind of how I view school. And so, in general, students are looking for the guidance of like, how might I use this to help me better learn? And so, yes, they can use it to, you know, cheat and do the thing and give them the steps and like not think. And in general, if we teach them the basics and when to use it, when not to use it, I see it as being a net positive, being able to, you know, help students really think through mathematical ideas.
So is that your central message to math teachers? And then how do you kind of buttress that message with strategies, tools, and more?
Yeah, I think of it as how does the tool or how they're using the tool position students as mathematical thinkers?
Uh-huh.
And so if we're using, so when I think about like student use, for example, of tools, I see kind of two styles of tools. Ones that just that give students step-by-step instructions. Here's my problem, here's step one, here's step two, here's step three. They follow along. And then I also see some that are more like sense makers, and they have the student provide their work and they ask them, or they say like, hey, I noticed that you did this well and here's a little bit you're unclear on. Can you continue on and give me a little bit more thinking? And those are kind of two separate things. And it's the same with like a human teacher, right? Like, are they sitting in the back and able to kind of like mimic what you're doing and then spit it out on the test on Friday and forget about it?
Right.
Or can we have students engaging in dialogue with each other, making sense of the mathematics. It's very messy, right? Like math teaching and learning in general is very messy. So can we get students into that messy, productive struggle? And I think about it, as I said, as like how, whatever you're doing, how is this positioning your students as mathematical thinkers?
Yes, and I would think because we would want to make thinking visible. We want to see that cognitive friction. We want kids to be thinking about what step they may take next, how they might justify that step, what might be anticipated. So they're going through a process of thinking carefully and thoroughly through a problem. So are you seeing that the AI available now is specifically helping teachers make thinking visible?
I see it, it's possible. That is possible. I would say honestly, the majority of tools I see, like the ones designed for work with students,
Yeah,
are those step givers. And that's kind of been the first attempt
right.
to go through. And there's a use for those. You know, folks can practice with those, and maybe if they're stuck, it could help a student who's very motivated to get through. Um, on the other hand, like you're saying, it doesn't get that thinking to be very visible. It doesn't ask questions. And there was a recent Khan Academy uh, it, um, study that came out that was showing that students they're just falling off. Like if they're not asked questions, they just are not motivated to kind of interact with that tutor. And so I only see a few of those tools like designed for students that actually elicit student thinking.
Mhm.
And the issue with those is like, okay, if I there's tools that will I think you just had someone on who was talking about Snorkel, and Snorkel is quite good at that. So I'll have the student answer the question and they might get it right but get a 2 out of 4, and so then they're like, okay, if the student got 2 out of 4, they got it right, and their tool is asking them, hey, I need you to show more of your thinking. I need you to explain this better. You didn't really get this idea fully. And those to me are very intriguing for making student thinking visible and getting students to explain the mathematics behind the idea.
Well, you read my mind because I recently interviewed Brett Shue, who is a math teacher in New York City, and he was explaining to me how we use Snorkel. So if you're unfamiliar with Snorkel, Snorkel enables first of all, enables students to actually, excuse me, record their thinking. So in solving a math problems, the students can draw, so they can illustrate, they can type. There are various ways that they can communicate their thinking. But for me, the key is that they can record their voice. So they're essentially creating a recording of their thinking. And then the teacher can provide rubric criteria that guides Snorkel, guides the AI in providing nearly immediate feedback to the students. And one of the interesting aspects of talking to Brett about his reaction is the students groan every time he says, oh, we're going to use Snorkel. But the reason they groan is because they know it's hard. They have to think, they have to express themselves. And his students are not native English speakers, so they're actually working on their verbal abilities, specifically their English verbal abilities. So we have a kind of a formative assessment platform that we can leverage.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. And, you know, for multilingual learners as well as native English speakers, the discourse in class is one of the top priorities for me. So getting students, like what if I'm coaching, for example, I'll often make a map with like the teacher and then who they speak to. And it's usually teacher, student, teacher, student, teacher, student. But my goal is to get teacher bounces the question amongst the students and then like comes back. And so I want them talking, you know, to each other, and then in this case, you know, to Snorkel, and getting them to speak about mathematics is actually really challenging for a really challenging pedagogical practice. And so it's an essential part that we want to. I think AI can help us with.
So you mentioned AI tutoring, and it's somewhat of a controversial topic, especially now because Saul Khan came out recently and said Khanmigo, the much publicized, well-funded AI tutor that's been adopted extensively in schools, has fallen short of his expectations, and it's Khanmigo has been roundly criticized, sometimes I would say harshly, and the edtech press. And but we have this narrative that the AI tutor is dying, and yet it appears that the AI tutoring technology is simply transitioning. I'll explain. Most people think of AI tutoring as a chatbot. So the chatbot has to wait for the student to ask a question and then responds to the student. But we have now interactive models that can actually see the student and can notice when the student is hesitating, can jump in and ask questions. In fact, it can initiate the whole conversation. So the AI's ability to actually see the student and to react to visual clues, some frustration, some hesitation adds another element. And also, we have hyperrealism, where we can actually engage face to face with a math teacher who looks incredibly realistic. And it heightens the sense of humanness, even though it's not a human to human connection. So there's a lot that's going on that's interesting and exciting in the AI tutor realm. So what's your sense of where we are with AI tutoring and math and where we might be headed?
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't heard of that one, but that's very intriguing because I think that element of students um, not asking, conmigo a question and then kind of losing it is a huge issue we see in math ed tech in general. And so for right now, the majority of the ones that I've seen are still in that phase where they're requiring a student to kind of like ask a question or engage. And so that, like you said, we have evidence that you'll see kind of like gains for the top students and the ones who are very motivated, and then not great evidence for remaining students. And so in that case, and those are similar to the ones that go back to my days, with the Boston Initiative, like folks that use those, they're possible to use those well. And the way to do that is to, number one, have a very specific problem you're solving.
Mhm.
So like not just I'm gonna fill math gaps, but like I'm gonna increase my math discourse, or I'm going to impact math fluency, or something very specific. Number two, connect it to the curriculum. So if it's like completely separate from what you're doing in class, we've not seen great results. And number three, use it with fidelity. So making sure that there's time in the school day. It's not like requiring students to go home and use it. Teachers get training on it, and the teachers are actually interested in using whatever product, so they'll implement it into their pieces. The ones you're mentioning, I mean, those are very exciting to see if an AI tutor actually can work through that like human element and kind of read a student and see where they are like emotionally and so on. I was just reading a study about Learn LM from
Uh-huh.
Google, kind of doing like a Socratic dialogue tutor, and they had humans. They had like a control case where it was just a hint. They had a human tutor via typing, and they had Learn LM, which was like an AI tutor. So it wasn't this cool like interaction. They couldn't see the students, so it was all via text as well. But the humans all looked at the AI ones before they were sent to the students just to make sure that they were good to go and all that. And for the most part, like 75% of them didn't need an adjustment. Like the edits were kind of minimal. And what they did mostly adjust for was like an emotional or pacing issue. So
Uh,
they were maybe a student was getting frustrated and the AI like wasn't noticing it. And so a human would be like, let's move on, or let's do this instead. And so those are the adjustments that they made. So as these get better and better, I see that being less and less of an issue.
I'm referring specifically to an announcement by an AI startup called Thinking Machines about interactive models, and they have some examples available on YouTube. And I sort of saw this interactive next level tutoring possibility through these machines, which is quite fascinating. And then a couple of months back, in an interview with the head of education for Google DeepMind, she said, we're exploring video and audio, kind of hinting that we're basically exploring hyperrealism so that we can transform the nature of tutoring. Now, I'm thinking to that again to that interview with Brett Chu, and Brett said, "Look, I wanted to create my own tutor specific for my students, meaning this tutor had to address a wide level. He's got just a huge gap in math math abilities and math levels from new immigrants from Latin America. And so he used PlayLab, which is a free platform that you can use to create software to create apps. And his reaction is, this is absolutely wonderful because it can sort of not replace me, but it can be me in many ways. I can help so many students at so many different levels, and hey, it can respond in Spanish if needed because I don't speak Spanish. And he's saying, but the thing is, it's also a crutch because I want them to first start off by tackling the problem and trying to come up with a strategy and thinking through how they might approach it. But he says they go right to the tutor because the tutor's so good.
Yeah.
So, we have that element as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting, case, and he's doing a couple of really great things that I talk about when I talk about teacher use. And number one is context. And so, right, he put his context in, right, like his materials and the way he thinks about math. And so when I'm talking with teachers about using AI, maybe in their planning or with students, I always encourage them to use some sort of research-based context. I'll have, I can't tell you how many teachers I've heard who are like, "Oh, I tried it out. It was terrible. I never used it again," because they're pulling from the wild, wild west of the internet, right? They say, "Help me differentiate this lesson."
Right,
It
right.
pulls from the wild, wild west of the internet. It's quite bad. And then they give up on it. But if you are using, like this, a lot of schools have Gemini as Google Schools. And if they add in, you know, give me feedback on this lesson from the NCTM 5 practices, it'll get a lot more useful ideas and material. And so, in this case, he's talking about Play Lab and, putting his context and his problems and so on, and working with his students in a way that he approves of. And that's a huge amount of work on the back end, and sounds like it's been very successful.
So let's take a little bit AI's benefits, proficiencies. Um, we both know there's been a huge increase in AI's ability to tackle math in the last 2 years. And I think often when teachers are talking about AI's abilities in math, they're referring to reports, press reports, or studies going back 2.5 years ago, where you mentioned that Google and OpenAI have reached gold level in the Math Olympiad. I mean, basically, they can handle the most advanced math problems that you would throw at a student at the secondary level. So they have these tremendous abilities, but we know they have limitations as well. You're dealing with math teachers who probably are like, wait a minute, I teach algebra. I don't have anything in common with the calculus teacher, and let alone the probability stats teacher. You're dealing with pretty diverse audiences. How do you help them navigate how to select and incorporate platforms and tools?
Yeah, I think it depends on how folks want to use it. And so if they're going to use it in planning, we can kind of talk in general of, as I was just describing, like we can, use it to differentiate our tasks and open them up and provide more access. We can use it to encourage discourse in our classrooms. And, we can use it to adjust language levels as we were discussing. And those are across all grade levels and all subjects, and work really well. Um, the the interesting through line with all the subjects you actually mentioned, right, like probability, stats, calculus, algebra, is that those ideas, if you include like matrices and vectors, those underpin AI tools. And so
Right, right.
so I can talk with K-12 teachers about how extra important it is. Like it feels like these AI tools are like magical machines. It's like mighty magical machine. It spits this stuff out. We don't know how it works. But really the underpinnings are like K-12 math. And so I feel like the job we have as math educators now is even a little more important because we can make decisions to use these tools for good, right? There's a lot of doomsday scenarios with AI as well. And if we have our students understanding mathematics underneath it, then we're going to be able to make better decisions, more human decisions, decisions that, are good for humanity over time. And that's going to be, our students. So math teachers can connect with that quite a bit and just how important their role is right now, especially in the age of AI.
Well, there was a study actually came out by Education Week saying how young students are increasingly interested in math. So they understand this. They can see there's a connection here between their foundation, their math learning, and potential to work in the AI field and in the AI industry. So there's this sort of growing interest in mathematics. And maybe we're fighting a little bit of the stereotype of, oh, I'm not good in math. And hey, I mean, we could get into issues of STEM and girls. There are a lot of challenges. But what's your sense right now of how students are reacting to the possibilities of using AI to increase their math abilities and their math foundation? Or anecdotally, what are you hearing from teachers?
Yeah, I think there's like the teaching group, there's for students, you'll see the skeptics,
Right.
curious students and very excited students about it. So we have that same mix. And students are generally looking for guidance, and they want to know the ways to use it, and to use it well, and they want to know where ways they can't use it as well. So I encourage teachers to have conversations with students about how they're using it, when they're using it, when's a good time to use it, when's a good time not to use it, like what crosses the line to cheating, what
Right.
stays on the line of like this is a positive use for me. And it's really those discussions that I think are some of the most powerful elements of AI right now. So I don't think right now, today, that, AI is going to solve our mathematical, issues. But I do think these conversations are really important and really helpful to discuss amongst teachers, between teachers and students. Because right now, what I do think is really important with the AI trends is that we still have time to make decisions about what we believe is right in the world with regards to AI and education and beyond. And so, like having these conversations is the time is now. We can still enact, guidelines and laws and so on to make it feel right for us.
So when you're going to schools or you're giving a talk, or maybe at the beginning you've done the word cloud and what comes to mind and cheating and others. I mean, but those who are willing to at least explore the possibility of leveraging AI, what kind of questions are they asking you, and what are you saying in response?
Yeah, I mean, folks want to know how it's actually useful, because they hear the headlines too of like this is great and it's terrible, and so they just want to know like how can I actually use it. And so I talk with teachers often about like the most common one is just how do I use it to help in just something basic like lesson planning. And so we'll talk through how to add that research-based context. There's this Microsoft Work Trends Index of 2025 gave AI kind of three phases. Phase one, AI as assistant. Phase two, AI as a digital colleague. And phase three, like agentic AI, human setting the direction, and AI agents kind of doing that work. Most teachers and most people are still at phase one. Like we open a chat and we open the next chat and we talk to it like that. And I'm trying to push teachers into that phase two. So having it push their thinking, setting up folders and projects and gems, and maybe even like dabbling a little bit into phase three and so on. So I'm really talking with teachers about how to use it for the messy work of planning so that their time with their students is really, really powerful and they can have much deeper conversations in mathematics with every student in their room, right? We were describing, students on various grade levels. That's every single math teacher, in America has like these wide levels, and that's extremely hard to deal with. And that's the number one thing that I talk about with teachers is how do I leverage this tool to meet the needs of all my learners in my classroom.
So you just
I'm
brought up,
actually,
oh, sorry.
sorry, go
Sorry,
ahead.
finish your thought, please.
Well, I was going to say I have a session coming up at a free conference this summer. If folks would like to check out. It's called the K-12 Math Intervention Summit, and I can follow up with a link.
Yeah, that would be great. And at the end, hey, we'll get contact information that we can share with people. Yeah, sorry for the interruption. What was coming to mind is you've touched on an important issue, and that is the use of AI by the teacher simply teacher-centered? Or is it student facing, and do students actually have an ability to work with the AI to learn? I mean, multiple national studies have pointed out that AI used by teachers is fundamentally teacher centric. It's kind of like my AI, I'm going to use it with the AI, but students, you can't use it. So they use it for lesson planning, they use it for grading, maybe administrative tasks, communication with parents, whatnot, but not necessarily with students. Is that what you're seeing, or are you seeing a transition towards maybe an openness or a willingness to explore how students might be able to learn using the AI, or are fundamentally the teachers asking for help for teacher-centric use of AI?
Yeah, I see more of the teachers wanting to use it for teacher use. And I think
Right.
I've also been convinced by like Justin Reich's thinking, where he calls this an arrival technology. And it's a technology that kind of came in uninvited to our schools. And we don't yet know whether AI use with students is going to go well or not. And so I see a great use for teachers using it with students who are like very excited about it. I think there are teachers who are kind of early adopters, and they're going to use it really, really well with their students. They're going to keep student thinking at the center and grounded on good practices and move forward. And right now, I don't see use with like students broadly across a whole school in math as necessarily the way to go. Like we just don't have the evidence yet for that. And so I've been focused on, all right, so how can we as teachers use it to, enhance our lessons, try to reach that one goal that I was talking about. If we want to focus on, math discourse, we're going to use a research-based math discourse context, and we're going to like hammer home our lesson plans to make those better on that one thing this year.
Okay, well, you mentioned an upcoming event that you're involved in, and I'm thinking, okay, what would you recommend that maybe teachers think about and explore this summer? So let's share that. We'll drop it, of course. We'll drop a link in. We'll drop your contact information. So what's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, you can go to my site and sign up for an email list or send me a direct email. My email is on, it's Karen at mathforhumans.ai. You can catch me on LinkedIn as well. Just search for my name, Karen Levin, and connect with me there and send me a direct message. That would be wonderful.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with me. And I know this is going to be a great benefit to math teachers and those who work with math teachers. And hopefully we can do this again before too long.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tom. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Karen.